Hey everyone, this is Mike with Make School, and today we're going to build a dog years calculator app. Okay, so this is my puppy Jack, and I just got him, and I'm not great at doing math here, so I'm going to build a simple app so that I can know how old he is in dog years at any given point here. He's adorable. Go ahead and take some time, admire him. Cool, let's move on. Now, before you get started here, you'll want to get your own pictures of dogs here. We'll need at least 2 pictures. So, go ahead and get a picture of a young dog, and Google a picture of an old dog. And I'm going to go ahead and change this over here to say young dog, just so there's no confusion. Okay? And when we're ready to go, we're going to open Xcode, and we're going to create a new Xcode project. It is a single view application. Now we have to give it a name. So, to keep things simple, dog years calculator. Now, it's okay in your product name if it has spaces. If you are a person with some coding experience, you've probably heard spaces are bad. But as you can see here, Xcode's smart enough to take care of it for us. You'll have to set an organization name. Don't worry about team if you don't have one yet. That comes with your Apple developer's license. And notice your organization identifier is like a web address but backwards. Instead of .com at the end, it's com dot and then whatever your organization name is. Just as a quick aside, because if you try and put this on your phone and you don't have a correct bundle identifier, it will give you trouble. The bundle identifier is really important to an Xcode project because this is your unique address on the App Store. So Xcode assumes any project that you're going to create will go to the App Store, so they want to make sure from the beginning it has a unique ID. Most important thing here, make sure the language is set to Swift. We are not using Objective-C. Ain't nobody got time for that. Device, let's go with iPhone, and leave these unchecked. If you check them, it won't break anything. It'll just add a bunch of extra code that you don't need. Let's click Next. I'm going to go ahead and put this on my desktop here. It's going to yell at me because I'm replacing it. No problem. Okay, we've created our first Xcode project here, but it's blank, obviously here, so let's start adding some stuff in. First thing we're going to do, go ahead and add in those dog pictures you downloaded. So I like to put them over here on my desktop. I'm going to highlight them both, and I'm just going to drag them somewhere into the folder. Make sure they are inside the blue project here. Yes, I will say copy items if needed. That should be checked. And finish, and as we can see, they've been added in. Great. So let's talk about what happens in an Xcode project. Where do we do all the work? Well, you have 2 main things you're going to be doing here. You're going to be setting your layout inside a storyboard file called main.storyboard. Okay? And this is inside of Apple's interface builder. So this is a visual way to lay out what your app looks like. It's great for designers and developers to collaborate here, and you can just kind of see there's all this stuff. Now, if we're going to lay out our app, we need to figure out what we're using to actually build it. And down here on this, see, if you don't see this, you need to open the right tab. We have what's called the object library. And if you're not seeing all this stuff here, you need to make sure that you're on the 3rd one here. It says object library. You can see it's a square inside a circle there. And these are, if you scroll through them, you'll probably recognize some of them from apps you've worked with before. We see text fields, switches, sliders, that dreaded activity view indicator. These are all things we've seen before. Apple's built these and provided them so that we don't have to take all this time and build them ourselves. We can focus on what we want to build and use standard assets. So, I'm going to find what I need here, and I'm going to start just literally click and drag them into here. Okay, so the first thing I need is an image. Oh, there's an image view. Perfect. Let's drag it in. I'm going to center it. Awesome. Okay. And then I also need a button and a label. Oh, there's label. Perfect. Let's put the label in here. I'm going to center it as well. Okay. And I can double click on it and change the text immediately. I'm going to say enter dog's age in human years. Okay, as we can see, it's kind of off the screen here, so I'm going to drag this back on. Okay, cool. And by the way, feel free to take what I'm doing here and make it yours. So if you want to change the font on this label, or anything really, we're going to go over here. Again, we're on the right side here, and I'm going to go to this little down pointing arrow, the Attributes Inspector. And because I'm highlighted this label, you can see it's highlighted, I can mess with it. So I can make the font bigger. All right. And I can maybe click on this text box. I can set, let's go with a custom font. Helvetica's nice, but you know what? Let's pick something else. How about Avenir? Oh yeah, that's classy. Cool. And if I wanted to change it, and let's make it heavy. Okay, now it's bold. That's great. And I'm going to go with size 20. Okay. Now we can see that it's cut off here because the label is too small for the text that's holding it. So I need to just stretch this out. And perfect. That should do good here. But that kind of looks bad. I want it centered within the label, so I'm going to click on this guy. Perfect. Okay. Now I just need two things. I need a text field for them to actually enter the dog's age. Wouldn't be much of an app if the user couldn't add their own data here. And I need a button for when they're ready to calculate it. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on the button. And I'm going to change the text to say calculate with an exclamation point because this is exciting. Let's make it a little bigger. And now let's make it pretty. So, first thing I'm going to do, well, I kind of want the background color of the button to pop here. So again, I've clicked on the button. You can see it's clicked on because of the white squares. And I'm going to go down to background. And now, let's go with a color here. I'm going to go with a nice Make School shade of blue. Close enough. Okay. And maybe I want to change the actual text color as well. And let's go ahead and change that. So let's go with like a, that looks good. That's a brighter red. Cool. And then finally, well, wait, maybe I want the app to have a different background color. I don't like just plain white. That's kind of boring. So I'm going to click just anywhere inside of this here. Okay. And I can click on background over here as well. Okay. Let's go with, there's a nice shade of puke green yellow. Cool. This is great. Now, if I hit the play button up here, this will build and then run the app. Alternatively, you can also hold Command and hit R. And we're going to see it spin up, and it's building it here, and it'll actually open an emulator here. Build succeeded, good. But we're going to see there's a problem. My guess here is this is going to look a little bit off and different than the layout we had here. And that's because we haven't told the app how to lay itself out yet. So your emulator will spin up, and it actually creates a full kind of sample iPhone in the background of your computer. So it runs exactly like it. And yeah, we can see it's kind of off and to the left here. We don't see the image view, but I expected that because we haven't told it to show an actual image yet, just to have the ability to show an image there. So I want those to be centered like I had it before, which means we need to pin them down. Okay, so I'm going to stop this. Now, Interface Builder has something called auto layout. And the reason for this, very quickly here, is because we have phone screens and iPads and all kinds of different screen sizes that are very, very different. So this way, Apple makes sure we're not building for just one device. Because what you don't want to do is just build for the phone you own, and it looks great there, but it looks bad on everything else. So we can say, I want it to generally look like this on every phone. My screen, it may be 100 pixels from here to there. On a bigger screen, it may be 400 pixels from here to there. Whatever. I want it to be relative to the edge here. So the way we do that is we hold the Control key, not Command, but Control, and I click on something, and I drag. You'll see that little blue line pop up there. And if I release, I can set a constraint. Leading space to container margin is basically saying, I want this much space in front of my container. Yep. So it'll always be that far from it now. Now, as I can see, I have a warning up here. Uh-oh. and size and vertical position are ambiguous for the image view. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory here. I've told it on the x-axis. Think back to graphs in math class here. You get your x is horizontal, y is vertical. I've told it this is where you should be in terms of x, but I haven't said anything about y. So it could be down here, it could be up here. I have to be explicit. I also haven't told it exactly how big I want this image view to be. Yes, I've had it this size here and laid out, but images your eyes can be deceiving here. So what we need to do is kind of set that. But like any good coder, I am lazy. So we're going to take a shortcut here. We could talk for days about all the cool things auto layout can do, but that's not in the scope of this tutorial. So instead, we're going to let auto layout suggest the constraints we have. Xcode, as an IDE, an integrated development environment, has all these tools here to make my job easier in building this app. Well, one of those things is I want it to look like this. I don't want to have to sit there and nickel and dime over exactly how many pixels each constraint is. So I'm just going to say, go ahead, Xcode, and if I wanted my app to look like this, suggest the constraints I should use. So I'm going to click on the entire view controller. And I'm going to go down to this little dude right here. It's a triangle inside a field goal post looking thing here. And if you hover over it, you'll see it says Resolve Auto Layout Issues. Click it. And if I scroll down, notice I'm inside of all views in View Controller. And I can add the constraints that I don't have, but sometimes if you add constraints, you can have too many constraints and they can conflict. So for instance, if I told it to be, I want you to be 10 from here, and I also said another, and I said I want you to be 100 from here. It doesn't know how to rank those, so we have a problem. So I'm going to say reset to suggested constraints, and what it's going to do is it's going to delete any current constraints I've laid down, like the example I put out there, and suggest them. Now, I'm going to go ahead, build it again, just hit Command R, or the play button, and we should see it should be centered now. It should look a little bit better. So if I go to my simulator, perfect. And as you remember, it was over here, kind of over by the left. Now it's not. Looks great. Cool. So let's stop that. And let's start doing the fun stuff, which is adding some code. Now I'm going to close my debugger pane, this guy down here, just for some extra space. And I'm going to go ahead and let's talk about where this code goes. So I have my interface builder, but that's only half of building an app. I've done the layout, but I have to do some programming here. I have to tell it what to do. Well, that's going to be in your viewcontroller.swift file. Now, in a massive app, you may have dozens of view controllers. All they do is control a screen, okay? And this is what they look like. We can see it's a class view controller, okay? And if we go to main.storyboard, I can click on my view controller, and I can go over to this dude, looks like a note card, the identity inspector, and I can see, oh, the class is view controller. Now there's a lot of classes it could be, but I'm trying to tell this view controller in Interface Builder, hey, you have instructions on how to behave, and it's inside this class. Well, we can go and work on that class here. So the first thing we have to do is connect the two. Interface Builder knows it has this layout, but the viewcontroller.swift file does not. So we have to let the two know that these objects exist. So I'm going to go ahead and use the assistant here. So again, I clicked on the view controller. I can see it's highlighted because it's blue around it. And I'm going to go up to the Venn diagram looking guy right here. The two overlapping circles in the middle. It says Show Assistant Editor. I'm going to click on it. Now what it should do, and about 80% of the time it's pretty accurate here, is it will automatically, it being Xcode, will automatically look at what view controller do you have highlighted? What class is that view controller? And then it'll open that corresponding file. Now in this case it was successful. This is class view controller, and over here I have viewcontroller.swift, which is open here. If it doesn't for you, no problem, easy fix. You're just going to hover over this guy. Right here where it says automatic, and you can hover and you can go, yeah, I think this is the file. And if it's wrong, don't worry. You can actually navigate through everything, and you can see it's just like over here. is exactly like what I have on the left. So, yep, view controller, that's perfect. We're there. Great. Okay. Now, I'm going to give myself some room so I can close those panes. I can always reopen them if needed. I'm going to scroll this over. Now, what I need to do is connect these objects. So, I'm going to give myself some room to work. I'm going to go up here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the control key, just like we set the constraints. Again, I'm holding control, not command. I'm going to control, click, drag. We see that blue line again. And you'll see it says insert outlet or outlet collection. Yep. I'm going to let go, and we'll see this dude pop up. This is my way of connecting it here so that the code file, the class, actually knows this UI image view exists and it's allowed to access it, modify it, all that good stuff in Interface Builder. So I'm going to give it a very accurate semantic name so there's no confusion what it is here. This is a great thing to do. I could name it in practice whatever I want and it would still work as long as I'm consistent. But always write code as if you're expecting somebody else will eventually read it. So I'm going to name this dog image view because it's an image view and it will show dogs. I need to make sure that this is set to outlet, should be normally. I don't need to touch anything else here. Connect. And we see it's connected it. And I know it's connected right because if I hover over this, look, it turns it blue over here and highlights it. Great. Let's connect these as well. I'm going to connect this label here. And I'm going to do the same thing. And we're going to call this dog age label. And I need to connect this because eventually I'll change the text in it. Last thing I need to connect here in terms of outlets is this, this text field here, because I need to be able to actually grab the data that the user has input. Okay, so I'm going to call this user input text field. Great. Okay. Now the last thing I need to connect is the button. Okay, and this is where things get a little different. Now, as we can see, we have outlets for these three. And outlets do exactly what it sounds like. They sit there and they let data pass through them. They just sit there and look pretty. They're not actually going to do anything. A button is different. Think about when you press a button. If you press a button, you want something to happen. You expect action. So we're not going to create an outlet here. We're going to control, click, drag, and we're going to create an action instead of an outlet. And I did that by changing this over. And I'm going to call this calculate button pressed. And you notice the difference here when I hit enter and create this is that whereas these just created a variable, I can see by the var keyword, this created a function. And the function's empty. It doesn't do anything right now. But that's because I haven't told it to do anything. Let's give myself some room to work. Okay. And again, just to double check, yep. Those are all highlighted correctly. I'm going to go ahead and I don't need the interface builder open anymore. So I'm going to go back to single view. I'm going to open the pane over here. And I'm just going to click on view controller. So now I'm just looking at my code. So let's think about what we need to do. So anything that we need to happen is going to happen when the button is pressed. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get the user's input. They entered a number. Let's see what that number is. So that's stored in the user input text field. Now, if you play around in the Apple documentation or, cool trick, hold the Option key, you'll see it turn into a question mark, and I hover and I click. It'll give me all this info about this here, and I can read up on it. Well, I know from experience that the user's data is going to be contained in this text field's .text attribute. All right, think of it as like a pocket on that object here. So let's create a variable to store that. I'm going to grab it from there. So I'm going to say let years equal user, perfect, input text field .text. I'm going to hit enter, .text. Okay. Now, ignore this warning here. All this is saying is, hey, you created this, but you haven't used it yet. Okay, we're going to use it in a bit here, so this will go away. And I can click, and it will go away. If you see a blue thing like this, drag it off. That's a breakpoint that pauses your code when it runs. Now, I know that this is going to be a problem here because I need to do some math. To get how many dog years a dog is old, you take its human years, and you multiply it by 7. Simple operation, but that still means I need numbers, not strings. If I look at what this is, by default, any text entered into a text field is a string. So, no big deal. I need to cast this to an integer. So I'm going to do int, and I'm going to use the int function that's built into Swift, and what it'll do is it'll look at the text inside of this int function call. It happens to be the data stored right here, and it'll say, if this can be turned from a string into an integer, do it. Make it an integer. Now, I see a little red bullseye here. This means error. Can't ignore it. My code won't run without it. Value of type, optional type string, not unwrapped. I'm going to go ahead and let Xcode fix this for me. We will talk about optionals. Optionals are super cool. They're a great way to deal with nil values, but not in this video. We'll do it in the next one, and that'll become obvious in a second why. So it's added the exclamation point. It's unwrapped it, and if I hold the option key and I click on years again, I see it's changed. It used to say string question mark. Now it says int question mark. Perfect. That's an integer because I've cast it from a string to an integer using the int function. Awesome. Now I can do some math. So if I have the years, I'm going to create another constant called dog years. And this is just going to be years times 7. Now I added the exclamation point here because if I don't, it's going to yell at me again because this is still technically an optional. Optionals, you have to unwrap it. For now, just listen to Xcode. But things that end in question marks have to be unwrapped with an exclamation point here. So now I have this value, and this should immediately create this dog years variable here, constant, and it will contain whatever years contains times 7. Great. Now I know the dog's age. I've calculated it. If they enter 7, it'll be 49. If they enter 2, it'll be 14. But it doesn't really matter what they enter because the computer is going to take care of the math for me. Okay? Now, I have the answer, but that doesn't matter much if I don't show the user what the answer is. Doesn't matter if we know, it's about the consumer. So, we need to do 2 things. 1, we're going to update our text field to say how old the dog is. 2, we're going to have some fun, and based on how old the dog is, let's say if the dog is under 40, I'm going to show the puppy picture, the young dog picture. And if the dog is over 40, I'll show the old dog picture because that dog's over the hill. So, let's do some code here. I'm going to say, let's start with the text field. So, the label, not the text field. I'm talking wrong here. So the label has a .text field as well that contains the message. We're just going to change that. So I'm going to say dog age label .text equals, and I've got a string here, an empty string. I'm going to just type my message. I'm going to say your dog is. Now, I don't know what this answer could be. It could be anything, right? What I really needed to say is whatever the contents of this constant is. Fine, I can do that. So I'm going to do a backslash. This is the one right under your delete key. And parentheses. And I can put a variable in here, and it'll go ahead and cast that variable. Now, again, if you're paying attention here, you realize, well, wait, this could be an error because this contains an integer, and you're putting it inside a string. Well, when I do this, it automatically casts this to string, whatever's inside of it, much in the same way that this casts whatever's inside of it to int. So, it's going to say your dog is, it'll grab this value, cast it to a string, dog, years, old. Great, okay? And now the fun part. Well, we need to display a picture, but which picture depends on the user's input. So we need to check something. So let's start with if dog years is less than 40, and I'll start a code block here. When I hit enter, you see it completes that for me. That's great. I can see that I'm inside the right code block if I go back and forth there. Okay. Well, if it's less than 40, if this is a younger dog here, so they've entered a value that computes to less than 40, I'm going to say dog image view. Whoops. Dot image. Now again, the image view is its own object. Contained within that image view is a spot for the image it'll actually be showing. But it's more than that. So I need to say just the dot image itself equals, and I can set it to something. Now, what cool feature of Swift 3 and Xcode 8 is I can just type the name of the file here, and it can recognize it and find it. So in this case, it's less than 40. I want to display my young dog. So if I start typing up, perfect, that's it. And I can even see the little picture over here. It'll give you this white box, which isn't super informative, but we know it's there because it works, okay? Now, otherwise, I can just say, any other case, go ahead and display the old dog. So again, else, open another code block, hit enter for it to close out, and I'm going to do the same thing, but with the other picture, dog image view dot image equals. Now I'm going to set it to old dog with the killer beard. Okay. And let's just clean this up a little bit. Get rid of the extra white space. The white space wouldn't affect my code, but it's sloppy. Okay. And this is, let's double check my code for sanity here. Easiest mistake to make, are you outside of your function? Nope. All this code is contained within this function call that will happen on here. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to hit the play button. And it should spin right up here. Here we go. Okay, looks good so far. Let's go ahead and click on this. Now we see that right now, we still have it set to a text keyboard. We could actually change this to a numpad if we like here. Go ahead and see if you can do that for extra credit. And I'm going to go ahead and say, let's start with a young dog. We'll say he's 2. And moment of truth, let's hit calculate. Success! The picture's stretched, but again, that's an easy fix here. We'll show that in just a second. Now let's go ahead and make him 20. Now notice, when I added a 0, it didn't change. That's because the function hasn't been called yet. This function, when I pressed the button the first time, started the function, did all this, and then it stops. So it's not sitting here constantly observing this and waiting for it to change. There are ways to do that, but again, that's outside the scope of this tutorial. So if we want it to change, we need to hit calculate again, and our old dog, perfect. Okay? Now, there's a lot of small improvements we could do to this app. We could make it so when I click outside of here, the keyboard closes. We could change this to where the aspect is it's not stretched for the pictures and things like that. We'll make a couple of them here just to stop. So I'm going to stop this here. This will be quick. Now, again, I can change in the storyboard here. If I wanted to change that, let's fix the picture stretching here. So I click on the image view. I bring this back outside here. I go to my attributes inspector. And right now we have, notice the view inside the UI image view. Its content mode is set to scale to fill. So basically it's saying take whatever picture I give you, no matter if it's too big or too small, and scale it to fit the exact size. That's not what I want. I'm just going to say show me the picture as the size it is. Aspect fit it. Great. Okay, and then the second thing, let's change it to a numpad because, well, I'm going to run this first here, and we'll see what sort of error we can run into. Now, I purposefully haven't changed over the numpad, so you can still enter letters here, and the troublemakers in the bunch here are probably thinking, well, wait, what happens if I enter a letter? Well, let's test it first. If I say the dog is 1, perfect, the picture is now the correct size, but let's change it, and let's say my dog is Z years old. Boom! Uh-oh, exploded, the app crashed, okay? And that is going to be because we have a nil value. So, We're not going to go over the solution in this video. That'll be in the next video here. But let's look at what's happening. Well, when I have a number like 2 in here, the string 2, the int function can say, oh, the string 2 is probably equal to the integer 2. Let's grab it. And it changes to an int, which means this calculation is fine. But when it's a letter in here, Z, or any other letter or symbol or emoji, it doesn't matter, the int function looks at it and it goes, whoa, there's no number value for the letter Z. So it just puts nil there. It says undefined, not 0. 0 is a number. We can work with 0. But undefined. So like counting to infinity. It's no one knows. You can't do it. It's like dividing by 0. So your computer says, what is undefined or nil? Better yet, think of it like this. What is infinity times 7? It doesn't work like that. So obviously your computer quits. It freaks out. It stops. Okay? Now, if we run this, the last thing we'll show here is if we run this and we run it with an empty text field, we'll have the exact same problem. So now, let's click on this, and let's hit calculate, and again, the exact same error. And that's because it starts with nothing here. So, nothing turned into an integer is still nothing, it's still nil, so we have the same problem. So, for homework, see if you can figure out how to protect yourself against this here. There's a couple things you can do and a couple different ways you can approach this. But what you have to do is basically see, does this contain nil? So in our next video, we'll look at optionals. And we'll look at how we can use optionals to kind of sanity check and protect our app from the types of crashes that can happen when the user isn't using our app correctly. That's part 1 of the dog years calculator. Thanks!